Again, good morning. My roof is leaking. Getting the progress diagnosed and fixed is requiring a lot of coordination and planning, something at which, in my opinion, I really suck. One of the results of this situation, besides making me very distracted, has been to make me consider how planning fits into Zen practice. Like it or not, planning this major repair is my current reality. In a practice of acceptance within a religion that's often caricatured as be here now-ism, how does one plan for and shape the future? Even short-term projects involve engaging with events outside the present, events which in some Buddhist teachings are held to be imaginary. Many, if not all, future possibilities don't exist at the time you're planning around them. Yet most of what humans do involves an element of wanting things to be better or different, which is to say that we're constantly planning towards the actualization of desires. And desire, as we all know, is the cause of suffering. How can we understand and apply this? My planning right now is complicated by the fact that my leaky roof is in an underground house. The first thing this has shown me is that some planning processes are stranger than others. In particular, planning around the unknown is significantly harder than planning around known situations. When a conventional roof leaks, whether it's made of shingles or metal panels or spray-on swimming pool sealant, the usual response is to get a ladder, walk around on the roof, find the leak. Usually it's pretty obvious from discoloration or standing water. And then you figure out a plan to get a roofer. That may take weeks and give you insomnia, but at least you know what kind your roof is, even if you've never paid any attention to it before. And from that, you know who to call. The planning is mostly about finding out when the client and the roofer can meet on site. With my house, though, the roof consists of nearly 2 feet of soil over some kind of waterproofing that you can't see without digging. Planning to fix that is anything but straightforward. Before a waterproofing expert can diagnose the leakage, some or all of the soil has to be removed, usually by a different crew. So now there are at least 3 parties whose schedules have to be coordinated. And the biggest player of all is invisible and very hard to predict, the weather. I've gambled on exposing my roof, hoping that the annual monsoons that we have in New Mexico are over. If I've assumed wrong, there's no negotiating with a thunderstorm. This is planning with uncertainty. And in real life, it's the rule rather than the exception. The Buddhist understanding of impermanence, of the inconstancy of any entity in any equation, guarantees that we only think we're planning with clear and well-defined variables. My unconventional house has taught me that lesson over and over and over. Don't get me wrong, my wife and I love our underground house. We don't own a furnace or an air conditioner. We can largely thumb our noses at whatever is the energy policy du jour. The house intrudes minimally on the local landscape. Giant windows facing south are our heat source, with a magnificent view to some mountains. They also offer intimacy with wildlife that even a duck hunter's blind can't equal. Nor am I telling this story for sympathy. My roof is getting fixed. A crew is digging up an estimated 95 cubic yards of soil so that I can get down to the roof structure and decide how to replace the waterproof layer. I have no clue yet what I'll use or how it will be installed. I'm having some sleepless nights while I lie awake trying to envision what's in that roof, invisible under all that dirt. I'm trying to plan, but I don't have access to real information. And planning under the best of circumstances can reduce me to a quivering wreck. That's why I chose it as a topic. To put it another way, the four great vows that we chant so often are pledges to change things for the better. Save sentient beings, transform delusions, pass all Dharma gates, leap tall buildings, manifest the Bodhisattva way. On the surface, vowing such things goes against the idea of going with the flow. Vows, great or small, are by definition solemn and binding promises of change. As such, they're plans oriented towards a future that's uncertain at best. So I'd like to share a few thoughts about planning for the future without leaving the present. I've learned what have turned out to be some of my best countermeasures against panicky planning and worry from Zen teachers, but also from some miscellaneous pundits, a few of them rather unexpected. Planning is an idea that many of us think is pretty boring. I certainly am right in the front of that line. And yet there sure are a lot of us who have given real serious thought on how to stay grounded while planning ahead. Let's start with Shakyamuni. The poor guy is often given credit for saying things he didn't, but one thing that is pretty clear is that he taught many variations on the refrain that the past is gone, the future is yet to come, and you have the gift of here and now. Thankfully, he doesn't add the old gag. That's why they call it the present. For all it's become cliched, the awareness that there truly is no time like the present is a powerful part of Zen practice. The risk is getting lost in the plans that we make. It's critical to recall that planning, along with worrying and daydreaming, is a process of symbolic thought. Symbols facilitate games of what if, and those can be extremely useful. When you plan ahead, you manipulate abstractions in your head. You're not moving the real chess pieces on the real board. That's both valuable and risky. The unreality of our imagined futures is why, as the Scots poet Robbie Burns puts it, the best laid plans of mice and men gang off to gley, which means awry in Scots dialect. Thinking in symbols has huge advantages in daily life as long as you don't really believe them. You can work out whether, for example, to plant a new tree on the left or the right side of your house, and imagine which will look better and which one will have the best balance of sunshine and shade, all without having to actually move 400 pounds of ball and burlap tree back and forth. But in that process, the ability to manipulate symbols is so flexible and allows so many aspects of any reality and misses others. The symbol can't contain our reality, and that's a prime reason not to give too much credence to the specific expectations that your what-if game raises. Quite a few Zen teachers use the phrase, don't be attached to outcomes. Better to plan to move in a direction and then adjust rather than lock in on a specific goal in a way that excludes flexibility. Someone said once, if the plan doesn't work, change the plan, not the intention. And I found that quite revealing and helpful. The image it brings to mind is from sailing. With your goal off in one direction, you often tack back and forth in several others in order to reach ultimately where you're going. Now, I'm saying all this as somebody who has the very problem that I'm trying to discuss. When I get wrapped up in trying to get something to happen, I believe the abstractions that I make and use. You kind of have to, in a way, but when your objective becomes real, Suddenly you're stuck. You can't change it. You can't adapt to circumstances. You can't improvise. All of those can'ts are serious losses. Some of you may have the same tendency, and if you do, you know it could be funny if it weren't the cause of so much suffering. Coming back to my compromised roof, as the crew digs it up, I'm experiencing another problem with wanting future outcomes to go as planned. My symbolic thought is heavily weighted towards negative results. My wife and I have learned to call this awfulizing, as in, Kim, you're awfulizing again. For me, the fact that someone could break a leg working on this, it could rain heavily, the roof could collapse altogether. They're all actually possible, but they can become so real that I'm paralyzed by real fear. There's some evolutionary evidence that our ability to think symbolically developed to deal with threats, not opportunities. Our nervous systems do seem to be wired to react most strongly to potential dangers. If your plans involve strangers, for example, it's pretty common to imagine them being cruel or at least rude and negative to you. That imagining creates anxiety, and that can make people behave strangely towards you. When I catch myself at this, there's one very useful bit of bumper sticker wisdom that makes a good weapon. What if, I ask myself, what if something goes right? Former President Eisenhower had a blunt opinion of planning. Plans are useless, he said. Planning is indispensable. My wife, who's a planner and hides behind the title of program manager, quotes a different version. All plans are wrong. Some are useful. In both cases, what matters is the process of planning rather than its products. How many of us have filled a day's schedule with so many tasks that we imagine that we have to finish, that by noon we've worked ourselves into a corner? The list of to-dos is an example of the plan itself being useless. It's kind of interesting that in addition to the to-do list, we call a chaotic brawl or a fancy event a big to-do. Yet even when we overschedule, not being attached to the product can give creative insights into the process. If you tend to think that planning should result in a firm and definite set of steps, which will cause you problems, it's worth consulting a dictionary. The word plan comes from the same root as to plant. But before jumping to the conclusion that planning is therefore all good, worth remembering that the term planting originally meant to stomp something into the ground with one's foot. Similarly, the term goal originally meant an obstacle. That's as recent as Middle English, so we still have that thought in the back of our mind someplace. Vow came from a word for preaching, and aim, as in the aim of this project, referred to a very tentative valuation or estimate. These wishy-washy and downright negative connotations are probably the real reason that in Zen we tend to talk of setting intentions, a rather neutral word that originates from the idea of stretching to meet a challenge or learn something. It's the same word that we use in the saying, the road to hell is paved in good intentions. It's been said and attributed to many people, from Ben Franklin to Winston Churchill, that failing to plan is the same as planning to fail. This strikes me as an unduly harsh judgment on those of us who regularly fly by the seat of our pants. There's one notable way that we Zen practitioners do this. The details of sesshin are planned for us, creating a container in which we can settle, work, and let go of worries, including planning. One of my very favorite things about practice is hearing the Han. And I marvel at the simplicity with which it solves the planning and timekeeping challenges of a whole community. Zen communities in Japan and China particularly were composed of hundreds, sometimes thousands of students and teachers, subsisting by farming extensive lands. How to get all these people to show up on the mat at the right moment, even from the furthest fields? The distinctive resonance of the Han, and beyond that, the system of bells that merely talk, communicated the day's planned activities to everyone, and very efficiently. There wouldn't have been a timetable posted. Hardly anyone would have had anything like an alarm or a watch. And a great deal of planning by the teachers and senior students, drawing on thousands of years of tradition, goes into creating this experience of non-planning. To the extent that a practitioner can give themselves to the rhythms of the daily Zen dance, they can experience the joy of planning without planning. It's not something easily transferred back into a layperson's life, but having really flowed from task to task with unimposed but perfect timing is something that changes you. At first, of course, new practitioners often have trouble accepting the conformity and routine of a day planned by somebody else. They want to be in charge and make their own plans. They show up late to zazen or meals and hate oryoki's formality. And by them, I mean I. This was me for the first months of my Zen training. And it was actually the magic of the Han and the beauty, both intellectual and artistic, that I found in it that pulled me through to accepting and adapting the Zen moment. Modern monasteries often can't use the Han. They're constrained by zoning laws, sleepy neighbors, whatever. The first few times I encountered this, I found myself becoming a sesshin expert. I memorized the retreat timetable down to the minute, checked my watch really frequently, except when sitting or doing kinhin, and I felt compelled to check the posted schedule about a dozen times a day, even though I had it memorized. This provided an excuse to read something, which you get very hungry for in sesshin. It made me appear like I was engaged in purposeful activity. And I felt like I was participating in the planning and thus was in control, although of what you can well ask. Eventually, I realized that I could just be aware of patterns of other people's movements and that they would tell me where to be when. If a significant percentage of people that are visible to you are heading in the direction of the Zendo, then your internal Han tells you that the rest break is over and zazen is coming up. This leads me to an older tradition, older than Zen, in Taoism, called acting without acting. In Chinese, that's wei yu wei, and it's a strategy of being receptive and still and without expecting or planning, just allowing the currents of life to take us where we're supposed to be. Not easy to accomplish in the context of modern, especially American society. But sometimes during simple, repetitive, tangible tasks, wei yu wei happens of itself, which of course is appropriate. As you realize that something needs fixing or doing, the tools, materials, the contacts you need seem to appear, even when working in an unfamiliar place. And sometimes it's not just things that show up. For fixing my roof, for example, the crew was recommended to me by a friend's offhand remark. Other times, a complete stranger may point you to what's needed without even saying a word. And that, to me, is one of the most satisfying experiences. There may be years of preparation behind it, but almost no conscious need to plan. Even though I think that's a cool way to live any chance I get, there's one suggestion about how to send an intention into the future that may be even better than Wei Wu Wei. It's from a rather wonderful piece of advice from the Buddhist-influenced mystic who called himself Osho. Be realistic. Plan for a miracle. Thank you very much.